Hi. Several years ago I started on a quest for the perfect wah-wah pedal. What I discovered is there is no such thing as a perfect wah-wah pedal. They're quirky and they do what they do. They require you to adapt to them. You're part of the sound. But I have found a few modifications that made it a lot easier for me to get my sound and made them a lot more fun. I'm going to share those with you. Hang with me. Okay, first let me say that this is not going to be a step-by-step tutorial where you watch me pull the circuit board out, unsolder components, put the components back. That would be quite long and really quite boring. I'm going to assume you know how to solder and have done a couple of things before. What I am going to do is show you the specific components to change, make some specific recommendations, and I hope you have fun experimenting, and I hope you have as much fun with wah-wahs as I do. Let's get going. Okay, all the modifications I've done and what I'm going to show you has to do with wah-wah pedals with no buffers and wah-wah pedals that the input and output jacks are not attached to the circuit boards. The modifications still apply to those wah-wah pedals, but I'm going to show you specifically on these wah-wah pedals. There are three specific kinds that I've done that I can show you, pinpoint the components for you to make it very easy for you. The first being the early 70s Thomas wah, the 80s Dunlop wah, and the reissued Vox wah. As you'll notice, they're all laid out alike. Little different component spread and a little different color, but other than that, they are actually the same. When you get one of these wah-wah pedals, the first thing you're going to want to do is make it a true bypass. In the original form, the input of the guitar is always looking at the input of the wah-wah pedal, and it loads it down and makes it sound kind of mushy. When you put it on your pedal board, it turns everything to mush. So you want to get rid of that. You can add buffers, but every time you add a circuit, you add noise. It's better just to get rid of that on a wah-wah pedal. Put it first in line. It won't even be there when it's off, and when it's on, it'll be doing something. The true bypass, there's two different switch configurations. One where you can just switch between bypass and wah-wah pedal, and another one that brings a wire around that grounds the input of the wah-wah pedal when you bypass it, and it eliminates the click. This is a well-documented mod online. Just Google wah-wah switch mod images and you'll see hundreds of those, and I'm not going to go too much into detail of that. As far as the pot goes, if your pot is not scratchy, I would just leave it, because whatever taper pot you get, whatever pot's in there, you're going to have to learn how to use it. They all respond a little bit differently, and you go to it. The iCar taper is very nice, but you have to learn how to use it. The 470K Jimi Hendrix wah taper is very nice, but you have to learn how to use it. Jimmy sure learned how to use it. If it's not scratchy, I would just leave it. If it is scratchy, find a good pot, put it in there, and learn how to use it. I'm not going to recommend any specific time. I've got all kinds in mind, and they all work just fine. And I'm going to show you where the pot is not as consequential a little bit down the line with another mod. Okay. Along with the true bypass mod, what happens then is that your guitar is louder, since it's not being loaded, than the wah-wah pedal. So the wah-wah, you lose volume when you turn it on. So you're going to have to somehow get that volume back. This resistor right here, we're looking at, I'm going to come in a little closer. Hopefully we stay in focus. In between these two caps is a resistor. It is usually a 68K. I like changing it to a 51K. A lot of people change it to a 47K. Both are good. Both are going to give more signal into the wah-wah pedal circuit and more output. That alone right there makes a pretty nice balance, and if you like the sound of your wah, if you're happy with it at that point, you can stop. If you want a little more dynamics or a little more bite or a little more something else out of the wah-wah pedal, we'll keep going. But that mod alone will balance out the volume. You'll have true bypass, you'll have a pot that you're going to learn how to use, and you'll have enough volume going through the wah-wah pedal, and it's perfectly functional. Another thing that a lot of wahs do not have power adapters, and some of them do have power adapter ports. What I like is just get a little adapter to put on the battery case and kick up an edge of the bottom plate so that this comes out without pinching it, and put that on the pedal board. The feet keep it up, and I like that just as well and better, and it really makes for a much neater wiring than having yet another wire going to power yet another device. Okay, if you want to further enhance the sound of your wah-wah pedal, the next modification is going to be the next resistor over. You've got capacitor, resistor, capacitor, resistor. That resistor right there comes stock as a 1.5K. A lot of recommendations say go to 2.2. A lot of them say a little higher. I like a 5K in there. It's a mid-range boost. That one controls a mid-range content and a kind of a break point. I like to juice it on up there, and I like using a 5K in it. You can decide whatever you want to use, but I would start with at least a 3K because it really does something to the wah. One of the issues that people address by not going too far with that is it really does juice up the volume of the wah-wah pedal, and now you're starting to get some boost when you turn the wah-wah pedal on. Some people like it, some people don't. But with a 5K, you get some boost. The next, and this is called the mid-range mod. The next one is this little guy down here. That comes as, I believe, a 470 ohm resistor. I like knocking that down, and that's what it is in this one right here, is a 470 ohm. I like knocking it down to 333. That's orange, orange, orange. Looks cool, and it sounds just fine. What this mod does is volume and low frequency content. Makes it a little fatter and makes it, again, a little bit louder. I've gone down as low as 1.5K. It's a little too much, and it starts to make a little bit more noise than I want on a wah-wah pedal. So I usually stick with like a 330 ohm resistor in that one. The next mod that is generally done, if you are enjoying the output of the wah, and you can do any of these in any order. You don't have to do a specific order. A lot of people do this mod first. This is called the vocal mod. This resistor is in parallel with the inductor and gives you the amount of peak in the sweep. Originally they were about 68K, 100K. Somewhere in the early 70s everyone seemed to agree that 33K was a very, very nice one. It gave an even volume in the sweep, but it doesn't give an awful lot of what I call quack or intensity to the sound. So I like to change that back to one of the earlier editions, usually not more than 100K, but somewhere around 68K to 100K. That one will give a peakier sound. You may not like it. One of my wah-wah pedals, I have it as a 20K, and I call it a gag wah, and it's more for textural stuff than it is for wahing. It doesn't really give a wah-wah sound, but it gives a great textural thing, and I don't have to be real careful with it. But in general, I like to go to about a 68 or 82 on that, and it gives, as it gets higher value, it's a little harsher, and it's a little faster. So if you want something that really kind of quacks in the middle, go 100K. If you want something that's really, really smooth, you might want to leave the 33K. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. And volume-wise, it's really the smoothest. Another modification that I like is a little pot. Keeley does a thing, the mid-mod. That's the second resistor that we looked at, and they put that on the outside, but you always turn it wide open and leave it there, so there's no point having a pot on that. And there's a few other people do things. What I like to do is take a 100K pot, put it on the outside, and use it across what I'm going to call the shunt resistor of the parallel resistor to the inductor. Down at 0, you have no wah. And as you turn it up, the wah gets more and more and more intense, up to about 100K. You can make this any value you want, and you can put a small resistor in series with it, which is generally what I do. I usually put like a 5K so it doesn't just go to 0, which doesn't hurt anything, but if I'm going to loan it to somebody or someone else is going to use it, the 0 kind of fools them and they say it doesn't work. But anyway, this knob right here allows you to tune in how smooth or how quacky, how abrupt your sweep is, you can dial it into your preference. I've got that on a couple of my wah-wah pedals, and on some of them I don't. The Halo inductor I found was rude enough where I kind of wanted to be able to adjust that. The yellow phasal and red yellow phasal is smooth enough where I don't really care if I have that or not. The old TDK square inductor is rude enough where you probably want that. The Chicago Stack of Dimes inductor is rude enough where you want one, but I don't have it on the one that I have. Okay, this wah-wah pedal had substantial boost when I would turn it on, so I wanted to somehow have some adjustability to where the wah was the volume I wanted it in relation to the bypass sound. On your pot potentiometer, this lug right here is the output of the wah-wah pedal. So it comes over here, normally goes to the switch. I put a 500K trim pot coming into one side of it. The center post of the trim pot goes to where the blue wire, or the wire, might not be blue, attached to the pot, and the other lug of the trim pot goes to ground. So now I have a trim pot to control the volume of the wah-wah pedal while it's engaged, and it does not affect the unengaged sound. The trim pot is on the wah-wah side of the true bypass switch. I find this modification to be most useful. And if I had to pick any two modifications, it would be the input mod and the trim pot mod. But I generally like to do all of them to this. Now, we have not talked about inductors yet. I heard it said one time that the inductors are like changing a string. These other modifications do a lot. Changing the inductor pales by comparison. It's a nuance, it's a texture. I've got red phasals. I've got a halo type. I've got a vintage stack of dimes from a Chicago wah-wah pedal. I've got red and yellow phasals on this one, on a switch. But in general, that's the least important, and once you get to that spot of having modified everything with the inductor you have, I wouldn't recommend changing that first. Now, another thing on the current Vox ones and on later issues of the Dunlop with the same circuit board, they started using, to expedite the manufacturing process, a connector. So they had prongs coming up from the board to receive the connector. These prongs are wired to the board, soldered to the board on the back, and the connector connects to the top. The wires are not soldered to the connector, so after time they start becoming intermittent. They generate a little bit of noise. I like to, and some of the wahs that I bought that were allegedly broken were just the connector had just failed. I take the wires out of the connector and solder them directly to those posts. On the Vox one, it's a copper clad or something that is very solderable. On the early Dunlops, they use some kind of a spring steel that you couldn't solder to, so they'd have cold solder joints on the board and non-soldered joints on the connector. So that was like the worst of both worlds. But I would highly recommend, if you want a good, reliable wah-wah pedal, that you get rid of the connector, at least in part, and at least solder to the outside of the connectors if they're solderable. On the Dunlop, where they were not solderable, I just snipped them off and took the wires and traced them to where they were going and soldered directly to the board. You can solder it directly to the bottom, but you've got a non-solderable component in there. So there you have it.